Today, from refereeing to product leadership, maybe they're the same thing, this is Confluent Developer.
Yeah, as a referee, at least you can eject the coach if you need to.
Yeah, right.
You can't do that as a PM.
No, you can't. You just have to deal with it.
So the rest of my career is really starting companies. That's kind of what I did. I think the lesson I took from that is like starting a business and growing it is a lot of doing whatever has to get done. And you can have a big impact if you're willing to kind of step out of your comfort zone and do that stuff.
Hello there, everyone. I'm Tim Berglund, and welcome to Confluent Developer, where we explore the fascinating journeys of software developers tackling hard problems. In this episode, I'm interviewing my colleague, Mike Agnich. From his humble beginnings as a referee of middle school boys' sports, as a high school boy, to becoming a senior product leader in my favorite data streaming platform vendor, Confluent, Mike shares the story of his job as a college intern doing real-time video processing in the days before it was a little easier, and doing it in a way to make American football a little easier to visualize on TV. Let's get to it. Mike, welcome to the Confluent Developer Podcast.
Thanks, Tim. It's great to be here.
Good to have you on the show. Hey, tell, in case anybody doesn't know, who are you? What do you do?
I've been a product leader here at Confluent for just over 7 years.
You just had an anniversary, I think.
I just did. I got, you get all these, you have these days and your LinkedIn blows up and everybody's like, hey,
congratulations. It's like, oh, is that now?
Yeah, just passed it.
The people that message you then and on your birthday, but you don't
that's
really.
Right. That's it. It's just
super awkward.
Birthdays
Thanks.
and work anniversaries.
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
exactly right. Yeah.
And it's kindness.
No, it's nice. So it's, I've been here for just over 7 years now and been in a number of different product roles. These days, I lead kind of the portfolio of products that doesn't include Kafka is the simplest way to put it. So the connectors and what we're doing with governance and been a lot of time in stream processing and table flow with unified storage. There's a developer experience part of what my team does and a partnerships angle. So I've got my hands in a lot of cookie jars.
Yeah, you do. Good cookie jars, too.
It's fun. Yeah.
And you better believe there will be links in the show notes. So how did you start? What was your very first job? Like, not technical job. I mean, like paperboy.
A non-technical job was, I played a lot of sports. And so outside of camp counselor, which was probably the first thing I got paid to do.
Oh, nice.
Those summer things.
Yeah.
I refereed and coached basketball.
Okay.
So I got paid to do that, which was a lot of fun. And I learned like refereeing is a lot harder than it looks. Like that job is a very thankless job.
I'm sure it is.
You're obviously, if you're a ninth grader refereeing a middle school basketball game, I think parents have strong opinions.
Yes.
And you're really not very good at your job. And inadvertent whistles happen all the time. It's a giant mess, but that would be the first consistent thing I had was doing some like refereeing and tournament stuff. Yeah.
Which is a job where you have to make difficult calls and a substantial fraction of your constituency thinks you're an idiot.
Yes, they all do. Yes.
All the time.
Yes.
I have always said that there are maybe many reasons why I'm not in product. But I think something about product management is really that you have to make these difficult really prioritization calls. You're trying to sense, okay, what do people want? Here's what people are asking for. How do we prioritize engineering resources? No matter what, I don't know if it's a majority, but a significant plurality of your constituency thinks you're an idiot all the time.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't think that about you, but you, as a PM, a bunch of people just think you're making the wrong calls.
Yeah, I think that's true. The difference is that those people are usually slightly more mature than 6th to 8th grade boys, which I think like as a class of people is like the worst class of people.
Honestly.
6th to 8th grade boys are annoying. As somebody who was one at one point, that's a tough group.
That's a tough group. Okay, so hopefully, like, folks in the field are not that.
No.
Okay, anyway, I'd never thought that before. It just occurred to me that, referee, PM, similar kinds of, you had to develop some thickness to your skin. And that's really, for myself, like, why am I not in product? Like, maybe I'm not qualified. I don't know, whatever. But I just wouldn't be able to stand everybody thinking I'm stupid all the time. Like, I have to do this thing where people like what I do.
Yeah, as a referee, at least you can eject the coach if you need to.
Yeah, right.
You can't do that as a PM.
No, you can't. You just have to deal with it. Okay, so from ref, that led to some other series of steps and to what you're doing now. whether it's here at Confluent or just whatever in your career, what's maybe the hardest or just most interesting problem you've solved? Now, a quick word from our sponsor. Confluent Developer, the podcast, is brought to you by Confluent Developer, the website, which has everything you need as a developer of data streaming systems. And it's completely free. We've got curriculum, hands-on exercises, executable tutorials, the online data streaming engineer certification, also free, a way to find a meetup near you, those are free. Everything is there. I really want you to be successful in your journey as a data streaming engineer, and this is the site that has what you need. Check it out at developer.confluent.io. That's developer.confluent.io. Now, back to the show.
So I had a very cool internship and when I was undergrad. Okay. And this was my first, I would say, full-time paid to write code. And I'm really not sure they got their money's worth, but I was probably after my sophomore year of undergrad. I worked for...
Exactly same sophomore year, January, got a job writing software. So good
so
start.
My job was at a startup, and the startup was called Sport Vision.
Okay.
And what they did, they were one of the companies, there were two at the time, that did like the yellow line for NFL games. And so that first down line.
Right.
They also did like the hockey puck thing.
Superimposed in real time on a video stream.
Yes.
Okay.
And I worked, and I wrote some code like that. If they used any of it, I'd be surprised. I'm really not sure they.
Early in your career, you get
I'm really not sure they were happy with my employment there. Okay. I can't say that they were for sure, but I got to work on a NASCAR thing they did. And, but what was interesting, I mean, this was late 90s. Mm-hmm. So far before the idea of cloud infrastructure. So the way this product was built was servers that sat in the back of an 18-wheeler, and they had to drive these things around from stadium to stadium and run them locally. And so it was like a bunch of color keying technology that could tell the difference between a Green Bay Packers jersey and the green field and the color of the field below it.
Okay.
And actually in real time kind of superimpose the line with the curvature of the field.
Yeah.
Very cool technology. Yeah. And, I think that what I loved about that was, while I may not have been very good at writing production code at the time, as a, whatever I was, a 20-year-old kid, I was pretty excited about working the games. Whereas I think most of the people would rather stay home on the weekends.
Right.
I accepted all the invitations to go and work the college games, the NFL games.
So you had an athletic background, sports reporting.
Well, and the jobs that they would need, it's not like you don't picture me as the person in the truck actually doing important things. They would usually send me with binoculars up into the catwalks of the stadium, and I would be up there like spotting the ball. I would say the ball's on the 27.4 yard line, that kind of stuff.
Okay.
But it was a very interesting technical challenge, right? Because you had these cameras that had to actually triangulate. You had a 3D map of the field, and you had your points of reference were the cameras.
Okay.
And so you had to be able to convert a camera angle to a line, like a non-linear line. It was basically a curved line that would move up and down the field, and it was doing real-time color keying. And as the game went on, sometimes the fields would get muddier, the shadows would change. So you had to go a day early and do all this mapping and like track the sun throughout the day so that you could be sure that if the sun went down, it would continue to work.
What's the curved line? Help me out.
So football fields especially, they're not flat. They have a crown because they want the water to run off to the sides.
Certainly.
And so they are not flat, and not all fields are the same. And so you kind of have to go create those maps and correct it and then get ready to do it. So I would say being able to work around that problem, I loved that because it was such like a great real world versus theoretical world thing. And you actually got to go and see and run it and learned a lot. I got way more out of that than they got, I think. But I loved the startup thing. Like I kind of got hooked on the startup thing there, and saw what it meant. That was probably in terms of the people building the technology, it was probably about 30 people, and it was an amazing summer. And I wish I could have been more helpful to them, I think. But I did travel to a lot of games and do some work.
I want to go track down some of the people you worked with and see if, number one, if they remember you, and if their assessment of you is as negative as your own. Yeah, I think you should be a little kinder to 20-year-old Mike.
Yeah.
He's out there doing his best.
I was doing my best.
Proud of that kid. And It's interesting. I mean, I'm listening to you. Their cameras, were they at a fixed angle?
Obviously, every stadium is different, but there was like
Okay.
one center and two on the sides, right?
Okay.
So you can go, if anybody goes to a game, you can kind of spot the three cameras. I think it roughly works the same way.
Okay.
And so you had to, each of those cameras had to be able to map. And so you figure what its two-dimensional view is, you've got to map that to a 3D reality
Right.
and then draw the curve over
And
it.
you were at some point in your undergraduate program, you're going to learn the linear algebra involved in, the matrix transforms that are there. Okay, fine. But like you're saying, things get muddy, the shadows change, and you actually have to engineer a system that
People trip on cables.
people trick. So is it still going to work? And you have to.
right.
What from a technology standpoint, just out of my curiosity, what is this? What language? How is this?
Wow.
Can you remember?
That's a good question. I remember that we were on, one of the cool things is we had those SGI workstations.
Ooh, okay.
So that was a big deal back then
That's
that
how
you
that would've
got
happened.
to work on one of those things. And actually their office was next door to SGI at the time, which is now this like computer science history
The
museum.
Computer History Museum. That's 10 minutes away from where we are right now.
That's right. Yeah.
And a shameless plug: if you're ever in Mountain
is
View
a
in the
good
Bay Area,
museum.
I
It's a
love
good
that
museum.
place. I
It
love.
is.
I weep every time I'm there. So anyway, but back to SGI. SGI workstations. So I'm going to give C.
Yeah, that
or
was
something.
C.
Yeah.
That was C, and because I remember there was a lot of
was a
there was a
Unix.
lot of memory allocation that had to be done and deallocation
And
like that.
therefore memory freeing. That
That's
hopefully you did right. And
That's right.
Most of the time.
Yes, yes. So that was C, but like I said, I think the first job they gave me was to get the printer working in the lobby. I think. so it was. I don't want to I did write code that summer, but I also was the person who could just make the office run better if that's what they needed to do.
Yeah, of course. You're a kid. You're going to do whatever you have to. So how did it change you? I mean, you remember it still some number of years later. You were in a computer science program?
Computer science. I was at Stanford.
You're Stanford. Okay.
Yep.
Also nearby.
Yep.
And like, what did that do to you in your academic program? You're thinking about your career. How did it shape you?
Well, I mean, it was very eye-opening, like getting out of the computer lab and getting into an actual, working code base that had to be deployed on these things that had to drive around the country. That was a whole, and they didn't teach us really any of that stuff in
you're just
school,
like, oh,
which is
that's-
why you feel so useless. You get in there and you're like, okay, I know how to write code, but that seems like it's only about 5% of actually what is happening here. And it's, so that was very eye-opening, and why I felt like I wasn't contributing as much as I should maybe at times.
Yeah, plus your sophomore year, you're like, here's a linked list.
Right. That's right. And it's a startup too, so it's not like it's not you were showing up from some giant intern program. I was the only intern.
Right.
And there wasn't, infrastructure set up to like make me successful. I kind of had to figure it out.
Right. What a great test that is, though, because that then, you have that experience, and, then you got into startups and other things in your life where, again, sometimes there's not infrastructure. You just need to figure it out.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the rest of my career was really starting companies. That's kind of what I did.
Okay. Bonus question. Favorite company starting experience?
Well, I started 3 really. I loved all of them. So the first one, actually, a couple of folks that I went to school with, they had started working on this company, and this company Zazzle, which is like still around, awesome company, awesome technology. Many of them are still there, but that was kind of the first experience coming out of undergrad and joining the thing that they had started to work on, and spent most of a decade there building that. And so that was awesome because it was friends and coworkers, which is both like very awesome and very unhealthy at the same time. I would say there were a lot of very long hours in that time, but that was a very interesting time in history. That was basically 2000, 2001. And the internet was still brand new. And I think the secret to success then was just to run as fast as you could into open space. And
land grab.
it was a land grab. And so there was an advantage having a bunch of people who knew each other really well and effectively had absolutely no boundaries on work-life balance was actually a pretty big competitive
Young
advantage.
people, maybe without a lot of other responsibilities in life.
Yeah.
And
And so that's kind of what we did. And so it was, there absolutely loved that time, learned a lot. It was one of these things where the code that I wrote there at first was actually, they've got kind of a manufacturing and a distribution part of their business. And I wrote code to like automate the printing of things and the packaging of things and the shipping of things.
Okay.
And that, I guess, qualified me to run actually manufacturing and distribution, as a, 22-year-old.
Sure.
And so, ended up hiring dozens, and then probably at one point, probably over 100 people as maybe somebody in my mid-20s, I guess.
Wow.
Which you learn a lot very quickly.
You learn a lot. There's a lot of responsibility. You're not going to get everything right, but you have a lot of chances to grow.
And especially there, the nature of that, like it was just, you're not hiring all those people I was hiring. These were not like computer science grads. It was a bunch of people that had to operate stuff at scale. So multiple shifts a day and a very different, something nobody trained me to do. So learned a lot there. Again, kind of just had to, I think the lesson I took from that is like starting a business and growing it is a lot of doing whatever has to get done.
Yeah.
And so if that doesn't match the job description you were hired to do, then that's totally fine. And you can have a big impact if you're willing to kind of step out of your comfort zone and do that stuff. So I love that. Second company I started was actually with another classmate of mine when I was at grad school, a company called Predictify, which was like, in a sense, like we were really building an information market. So you could come and really ask a deterministic question, you could get answers, and it would give you a ton of interesting data, and then track over time if you were right or wrong. Like some of these more modern prediction markets that have become popular in the recent days, I would say we were a very early version of that.
Okay.
And
prediction market, if for the listeners, like almost like you can place a bet on what you think is going to happen.
Yeah, that's
and
exactly
the average
right.
price.
That's right.
It uses basically a pricing mechanism to aggregate the opinion of a bunch of people.
That's right.
They tend to be super accurate in predicting like elections and things like that.
Yep.
Fascinating thing. Yeah.
And so I did that for a few years, but I would say we were a casualty of the 2009 downturn.
Sure.
And so that one, as much as I think we built some amazing stuff, the team was fantastic, didn't work out to where we hoped it would go.
Sure.
And then the last company I started was a company called Terrain, which ended up being acquired here into Confluent, which is how I came in here.
Yeah.
And that's where I kind of made the jump over to enterprise. And we had built a product that, leveraged some Kafka and Elastic and some other stuff on the back end to do what really we were aiming and working on a lot of like search and recommendation systems. But it ended up being, there was a lot of stuff there about real-time ETL that had to get done, getting all the data into one place, and being able to like visually organize it and work with it. And that company ended up getting acquired into Confluent, which is how I came in here.
And the rest is history. A lot more to talk about on future episodes. I'd like to dig into some of those things some more in the future.
I would love to do that.
All right. My guest today has been Mike Agnich. Mike, thanks for being a part of Confluent Developer.
Thanks, Tim.